The recently concluded women's Ashes between Australia and England down under was a huge success for the Australians, and I think an ongoing huge success for the game as a whole, which is continuing to push a lot more women into the sport and is trying to promote a lot more women's test cricket. First things first though, shout out to these icons. We've all seen the shirts that people are wearing recently that says everybody watches women's sports. Well, these two have taken it to an even better level. But I'd like to point something out and ask a question about the umpires in women's test match cricket. This is Claire Polisak, probably the top-ranked women's official in the world in the most recent Ashes test match. She's got on the full-branded ICC top and hat with the Emirates sponsorship, which is the same kit that all of the men's umpires wear in men's test cricket, the ICC branding and the Emirates sponsorship. It would seem obvious then that in domestic first-class tournaments like the West Indies 4-day championship that the umpires there would wear locally branded kits. The umpires are often kitted out in this domestic kit for warm-up matches or tour matches as well. So if Australia goes and plays against Middlesex, or if England comes over and plays against Jamaica in a warm-up game for the test matches, then the umpires would probably be kitted out in this domestic kit. But it's not always the same in women's cricket, because often for women's test matches, you'll have the umpires kitted out in that domestic kit. You can see this is not the ICC logo, but the ECB logo instead. Not the best pictures maybe, but here it is again from the women's test match last year in England. You've got the umpires in domestic kit. Meanwhile, the most recent test to take place in South Africa has Lauren Angambang kitted out in the ICC kit. But I think if we're going to continue to add context and legitimacy to women's test cricket, which we should, then we ought to have the same system for choosing umpires as the men's game. As we've discussed here recently on the page when we were talking about Steve Buckner, the ICC elite panel of men's test umpires has been around since the late 90s, and I don't know why we've been so slow to adopt a women's elite panel. Now, there have been some changes made recently to the ICC's umpiring panel's website, which includes this, which is a classification and a panel that I hadn't noticed before called the ICC Emerging Umpires Group, and features all of these women's umpires that stood in the women's senior T20 World Cup last summer. Just looking at the names on here, this is clearly what you could consider a women's elite panel. And while I think that it's clearly a good thing that Claire Polisak and Eloise Sheridan are standing now in multiple test matches every year, I don't know why there's two Australians on the field umpiring with Australia playing. Because if the ICC thinks that using neutral umpires only for men's tests is an important thing, then why isn't it just as important for the women's tests?